Hello everyone, my name is Jenny and today we're going to talk about quadratic equations and how to solve them. So during this short lesson, I'm going to take you through an easier example and then a little bit trickier an example, and hopefully by the end you should be able to solve both of them easily. Okay, so first things first, what is a quadratic equation? A quadratic equation is essentially any equation where the highest power of x is 2. Okay, so you don't have any x cubes or x to the power of 4s. The only power you're going to get is x squared. But because of this squared, it is hard to solve the equation using the normal way you may have been taught when doing linear equations. So I'm going to teach you a slightly different method. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the right-hand side... you want to make sure that the right-hand side of the equal sign is always equal to 0. So that means if you have, if you had, say, x squared minus 2x equal 35, you just flip it around to the other side so that the right-hand side is always equal to 0. Okay. Right, so now what you want to do, so that's the first step. The next step is you want to label the parts of your equation. So we're going to label them A, B, and C. And what we're doing here is we're labeling the coefficients. So A is equal to 1 because there's nothing in front of the x squared, so just one of them. B is equal to minus 2 in this situation, and C is equal to minus 35. So after you've labelled, you want to search for two numbers. So you're looking for a pair of numbers that multiply to equal AC. So in this case, that is 1 times minus 35, which is minus 35. And those same numbers have to add up to B, which in this case is minus 2. Okay, so that can be a little bit tricky at first. But the way I like to do it is I like to mainly focus on the AC first. So if we're looking at minus 35, what numbers would multiply to make minus 35? So top of my head, I'm thinking probably 5 and 7. They sound, they sound like they would work. So if we think about 5 and 7, 5 times minus 7 is equal to minus 35, so that fulfills that criteria. And 5 plus minus 7 equals minus 2, so that fulfills the other criteria as well. So we've got our two numbers, which are 5 and minus 7. Right, so I'm just going to neaten this up so we don't get too messy. Right, so we've got our two numbers, which, as we said, were 5 and minus 7. Okay. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to write out our original equation again, but in a different form. So the original equation was x squared minus 2x minus 35 equals 0. And what we're now going to do is we are going to rewrite this minus 2 bit, and we're going to incorporate those two numbers that we just found, the 5 and minus 7. So can we all agree that this equation here is the same as this equation here, x minus 35, okay? So it's exactly the same thing. All I've done is instead of writing minus 2, I replaced it with 5 minus 7x, so 5x minus 7x, because that is also equal to minus 2. Great, so now that we've done that, the next part of this method is actually quite easy. It gets quite easy from here. So what we want to do now is with this super long equation, we're going to group it into sections. We're going to group it into manageable chunks. Okay, so section 1 over here, x squared plus 5x. What we want to do here is we want to factorize. So we want to take out the common variable, which in this case is x. So we can take x out, and if we do that, we're going to be left with x, because x times x is x squared here. And if we do the same thing for 5x, we're going to be left with 5, okay? Because x times 5 is 5x. Okay, perfect. And now we want to do exactly the same thing with this section here. Okay, so what can we take out? Well, I'm thinking we can take out minus 7. So if we take out minus 7, see I'm doing exactly the same thing. Well, I'm going to be left with x for that one, and I'm going to be left with 5 for this one. Right, so lovely. Now we have a slightly factorized equation. But what we can see here is actually there are two common variables. There's a common variable again, which is x plus 5. So let's take that entire bracket out. Let's neaten things up a little bit. So if I take out x plus 5 from my new two sections, okay, if I take x plus 5 out of this section here, well, I'm left with just x. And if I take x plus 5 out of this section here, well, I'm left with minus 7. Just put those brackets in, and now that equation looks extremely neat. Right, so now the next bit is quite easy. If we think about multiplications that result in 0, 0 times 0 equals 0, 100 times 0 is 0, anything times 0 is 0, which means these two numbers, these brackets, must equal 0. Okay, so at least one of them has to equal 0. So we don't know which one, so for now, let's just say both of them equal 0. Oh, sorry. X plus 5 equals 0, and x minus 7 equals 0. Therefore, x will equal either minus 5 or 7. So here you have now solved your equation. And if you wanted to check, if you wanted to plug in either minus 5 into this original equation here, x squared minus 2x minus 35, you would indeed get 0. And if you did the same for 7, you would also get 0. So that was the easier example. Let's move on to a slightly trickier one, and we'll see that this method works. Right, so now this equation looks slightly more complicated because we've got a whole other set of coefficients. So what's the first thing we're going to do? Well, we're going to label. So we've got A, B, and C. Now we're looking for two numbers that multiply to AC, which is 24 in this case, A times C. And those same numbers have to add up to B, which is minus 11. So we're looking for numbers, we're thinking about numbers, and I'm thinking maybe 8 and 3. 8 and 3, they sound like they would work. So let's have a look. Maybe minus 3 and minus 8. So minus 3 plus minus 8 does indeed equal minus 11. And minus 3 times minus 8 does equal 24. So we've got our pair. Right, now the next thing to do is, as I said before, rewrite this original equation. So at 12x squared minus 11x plus 2, I'm going to rewrite this with those numbers that we just found. 12x squared, going to write that as 3x minus 8x plus 2 equals 0. Because this section is equal to this. Yep. Okay, right. Now that we've done that, we're going to split our equation into two. Oh, sorry. We've got this bit here, and we've got this bit here. And once we've done that, now all we're going to do is factorize the two groups. So the first group here, 12x squared minus 3x. What are we going to take out? Well, I'm thinking we can take 3x out. If I take 3x out of 12x squared, I'm going to be left with 4x. Okay, and taking that 3x out of minus 3x, I'm going to be left with minus 1. And we do the same for this section. What can I take out? Well, I'm thinking we can take out 2. So we take out minus 2 here, and that's 4x. If we take, so because 4x times minus 2 is minus 8, and if we take minus 2 out of 2, so 2 divided by minus 2, we're going to be left with minus 1. Okay, so now we've got two of the same brackets, same set of brackets, 4x minus 1, so we can factorize again. 4x minus 1, take that out of the first section, we are left with 3x. Do the same for the second section, if we take 4x minus 1 out, and we are left with minus 2. Okay, last step now. As the multiplication equals 0, that means either of the brackets could equal 0 too. So now we just handle them separately. 4x minus 1 equals 0, and 3x minus 2 equals 0. And now you would just solve them as you would any linear equation, and therefore x will equal 1 over 4, or x could equal 2 over 3. Bob's your uncle, you've solved quadratic equations. So if you use this method, it is quite handy And it works when the quadratic is, simple, like in the first example, or even a bit trickier in this one. So I hope this helps, and thank you for listening.